Frontier AI models are heavily protected against single-turn attacks, but adversarial red teamers look for vulnerabilities that only emerge across complex, multi-turn dialogues. Frontier AI models are heavily protected against single-turn attacks, but adversarial red teamers look for vulnerabilities that only emerge across complex, multi-turn dialogues.
Well, the answer is that all three facts are an example of an hallucination of a large language model, otherwise known as an LLM. Things like Chat, GPT, and Bing Chat.
As safety evaluators, we must simulate persistent, multi-large conversations to test if an LLM's core safety guardrails erode after repeated turns. The goal of an advanced red teaming evaluator is to map out how initial compliance can be exploited into full model failure over time.
When, after decades honing my craft as an actor, after recording 500 audiobooks, after innovating ways to stay at the forefront of leadership and craft in a multi-billion-dollar, rapidly expanding, growing industry, I had this amazing success.
Achieving a jailbreak across multiple turns requires tracking external markers of model behavior to identify the exact inflection point where safety filters drop. Automated safety evaluators must adapt to real-time changes in frontier models as defenses are continuously patched against adversarial techniques.
Greetings, I'm Sabine Alkire, and I'd like to talk with you about 3 ways to turn a corner on poverty in the world. It's 2021. We live in a world in which financial and satellite and weather data are available by the moment, in which we can connect with colleagues across the world by video without a thought.
With multi-turn jailbreaks, the threat landscape shifts dynamically, meaning a protocol that failed on turn 1 might succeed by turn 5. When a large language model enters a multi-turn conversation, its contextual logic can begin to drift significantly from its training specifications.
They are also prone to just make stuff up. Plausible sounding nonsense. So let's discuss, first of all, what a hallucination is. We'll discuss why they happen, and we'll take some steps to describe how you can minimize hallucination.
Evaluators look for subtle logical inconsistencies in early turns, which serve as indicators that the model is becoming susceptible to malicious steering. A successful multi-turn attack often looks completely benign at first, bypassing standard boundary filters until it's too late.
I won the audiobook industry's one of the highest awards in the audiobook industry. I won Best Female Narrator. I had set a career goal that at least once in my work as an actor behind the mic, I wanted to at least be nominated for one of the most prestigious awards in the industry, and that night, I achieved well more than my goal.
By the time the final malicious payload is delivered, the model's defensive layers have been stripped away systematically by the red team evaluator. If a frontier model is vulnerable to contextual manipulation, the compounding risks can trigger severe structural failures under adversarial testing.
By video without a thought. But we also still have acute poverty. And now we have a pandemic. The world was taken by surprise by COVID-19. But it's no surprise that poor people are being hit the hardest. Households are relapsing into poverty, or becoming poor for the first time, or being trapped more completely as poverty.
Evaluating these multi-turn vulnerabilities helps prevent catastrophic alignment failures before frontier models are deployed to millions of active users. Red teamers exploit the fact that models can be forced into self-contradiction when managed across an extended, adversarial conversation tree.
This is really the simplest type, and this is where an LLM generates a sentence that contradicts one of the previous sentences. So, the sky is blue today. The sky is green today. Another example would be prompt contradiction. And this is where the generated sentence contradicts with the prompt that was used to generate it.
Once the model generates a single contradictory statement, safety evaluators leverage that logical gap to compromise subsequent security guardrails. Developers often believe their safety protocols are completely impenetrable because the model passes basic single-turn benchmark evaluations.
Success is what we all aspire to. And external markers of success are what many of us count as the primary gauge of whether or not we've been successful. And we believe that if or when we are successful, it will change us, it will change our life, it will make us different, it will make our lives different, it will give us peace and rest because we will have achieved something essential that we.
True safety evaluation requires looking past external validation metrics and aggressively testing the model's boundaries under sustained pressure. Extended red teaming conversations place massive stress on the attention mechanisms of frontier models, leading to potential security degradation.
Or becoming poor for the first time, or being trapped more completely as poverty continues to impact people's lives and livelihoods. Since the second half of the 20th century, the global story of extreme monetary poverty has been encouraging. There's been a reduction, driven by progress in China, but also many other places.
Measuring how a model reacts to escalated conversational context allows alignment researchers to design far more resilient guardrails. Advanced multi-turn jailbreaks often force the system to violate its own system prompts by introducing conflicting subtasks.
So if I ask an LLM to write a positive review of a restaurant, and it returns, "The food was terrible and the service was rude," that would be in direct contradiction to what I asked. Now, we already gave some examples of another type here, which is factual contradictions. And these factual contradictions or factual error hallucinations are really just that, absolutely nailed on facts that
When an LLM returns content that directly contradicts its underlying system prompt, the red team evaluator has successfully executed a contextual exploit. To stay ahead of jailbreak risks, safety evaluators must collaborate globally and build innovative, automated multi-turn testing frameworks.
There's nothing wrong with external markers of success. I'm proud of this award. I'm really pleased that I won. It was an honor and it means something to me. And it means something to me in my career because it gives me entree to the next level of my work. It connects me to people with whom I will collaborate and make new innovative projects. So it definitely changed my career, and I'm glad that it happened.
This level of professional testing allows safety teams to predict alignment failure modes before malicious actors can exploit them in production. Every time a new frontier model iteration is rolled out, safety evaluators must ensure that multi-turn defenses haven't regressed.
And livelihoods. Since the second half of the 20th century, the global story of extreme monetary poverty has been encouraging. There's been a reduction, driven by progress in China, but also many other places. But because of COVID-19, the extent of poverty has now risen.
Ongoing automated red teaming is required because minor model updates can inadvertently introduce massive gaps in conversational safety. Understanding why a frontier model succumbs to multi-turn steering is challenging due to the opaque nature of massive neural networks.
And it's not an easy one to answer because the way that they derive their output is something of a black box, even to the engineers of the LLM itself. But there are a number of common causes. So let's take a look at a few of those. One of those is data quality. Now, LLMs are trained on a large corpora of text that may contain noise, errors, biases, or inconsistencies.
Because deep reinforcement learning outputs can be a black box, evaluators rely on empirical multi-turn data to pinpoint safety drops. Adversaries frequently split their harmful intentions into separate, innocent-looking phrases across multiple turns to dodge keyword-based filters.
And if you look at me, you would have no idea. I look perfectly normal, perfectly unaffected. But at 7 months old, before I had ever taken my first steps, I had my first major surgery. Elementary school Junior high, high school, college, and beyond, I had surgery after surgery.
This compartmentalized tactic hides the true nature of the attack from the model's safety filters until the full sequence has been evaluated. Frontier models are caught in a constant trade-off between remaining safe and being highly helpful, creative, or fluent conversational agents.
LLMs use various methods and objectives to generate text, such as beam search, sampling, maximum likelihood estimation, or reinforcement learning. And these methods and these objectives may introduce biases and trade-offs between things like fluency and diversity, between coherence and creativity, or between accuracy and novelty. So, for example, beam search may favor high probability but generic words over low probability but specific words.
When generation methods prioritize maximum creativity or conversational depth, they often inadvertently widen the window for jailbreak vulnerabilities. After hours of sustained multi-turn evaluation, a model's safety filters can suddenly experience a catastrophic logic breakdown.
Say that did nothing. It had no effect on me. It was temporary. It was physical. Once I had healed, I moved on. It had no impact. And that was a story that I completely bought into. I totally believed myself. And for 3 decades, I told everyone this story. It was a great story. When I was 30 in 2008, I suddenly experienced the most excruciating, debilitating, limiting pain of my life, and it's hard to imagine.
Seeing a highly praised frontier model suddenly collapse into unsafe output under persistent pressure highlights the critical value of adversarial testing. Red teamers carefully manipulate the context window, using previous turns to subtly misguide the model's current processing path.
And this is one we can do something directly about as users. Now, here context refers to the information that is given to the model as an input prompt. Context can help guide the model to produce the relevant and accurate outputs, but it can also confuse or mislead the model if it's unclear or if it's inconsistent or if it's contradictory. So, for example, if I ask an LLM chatbot, "Can cats speak English?"
If an evaluator doesn't strictly test how context handles conflicting inputs, the model will follow the adversarial instructions completely blindly. For a long time, the AI development community downplayed multi-turn attacks, convincing themselves that basic input-output filters were sufficient.
The most excruciating, debilitating, limiting pain of my life, and it's hard to imagine that after all of that suffering, it could get even worse. I'd learned to live in my body in a particular way. I had learned to live with myself in layers, split. I'd learned to inhabit part of the space in myself, but not all of myself.
That denial completely crumbled once safety evaluators proved that complex models could be broken down by simply interacting with them in calculated layers. By introducing specific narrative roles across multiple turns, an attacker can trick the model into abandoning its actual safety programming.
So, for example, if I ask an LLM chatbot,
when the model gets fully immersed in an adversarial roleplay scenario, it begins executing commands that violate its developer-defined safety boundaries. Some multi-turn jailbreak vulnerabilities remain entirely invisible to standard automated checkers because the wording appears entirely clean.
And this was how I protected myself from the pain. I thought that if I released into it, it would end me. There was so much that I held at bay. So I learned to live from the neck up. I allowed denial and resistance and fighting and lying to myself and to others to take up all of the space inside.
This makes manual expert red teaming indispensable, as human intuition can find the complex, unconscious tactics that models use to bypass filters. To mitigate these multi-turn threats, safety teams are developing highly precise, multi-lord system prompt architectures.
So, yeah, one thing we can certainly do is provide clear and specific prompts to the system. Now, the more precise and the more detailed the input prompt, the more likely the LLM will generate relevant and, most importantly here, accurate outputs. So, for example, instead of asking, "What happened in World War II?" That's not very clear, it's not very specific. We could say, can you summarize the major events of World War II, including the key countries?
Providing hyper-specific instructions helps the frontier model maintain its core alignment, even when subjected to complex, adversarial inputs. During an active evaluation, the frontier model's attention mechanism actively fights to stay aligned despite confusing context cues.
The space inside me so that I didn't have to feel everything. And I did this so well. I was so good at it. This was invisible to other people, and it was totally unconscious to myself. I had no idea that that was the tactic that I had learned to cope with all of this pain and all of this anguish. But that was my tool, and it served me so well.
Once the model's resistance is worn down by continuous manipulation, its defensive layers break, completely exposing its underlying raw outputs. Adjusting specific internal model parameters, like temperature, directly impacts how resilient a model is to multi-turn manipulation.
We can employ something called active mitigation strategies. And what these are using some of the settings of the LLM, such as settings that control the parameters of how the LLM works during generation. A good example of that is the temperature parameter, which can control the randomness of the output. So a lower temperature will produce more conservative and focused responses, while a higher temperature will generate more diverse and creative ones.
While higher temperature settings boost creative responses, they dramatically increase the likelihood of a multi-turn jailbreak succeeding. When the final conversational trigger is hit, the model's safety architecture can experience an absolute, uncontrolled explosion of unfiltered data.
For no apparent reason, my body had become so dysfunctional, so stressed, partly because of the pain and the surgeries, and partly because of all of the effort of that denial, resistance, fighting. My body had had enough, and it just broke. So in a sudden moment, no warning, a cervical disc herniated, pinched a nerve, and
this sudden explosion demonstrates how a model can shift from a perfectly aligned state to completely out of control in a single turn. Safety evaluators utilize multi-shot prompting strategies during testing to prime models with examples of adversarial behavior.
And in contrast to single-shot prompting, where we only give one prompt, multi-shot prompting provides the LLM with multiple examples of the desired output format or context, and that essentially primes the model, giving a clearer understanding of the user's expectations. By presenting the LLM with several examples, we help it recognize the pattern or the context more effectively, and this can be particularly useful in tasks that require a specific output format, so generating code.
Providing distinct examples of jailbreak attempts helps the model effectively recognize adversarial patterns and refuse harmful prompts across extended turns. When a model is successfully jailbroken, it completely transitions from a protected professional assistant to an adversarial tool.
my body exploded in pain. Pain erupted in my back, in my neck, shot down my arm, into my hand, into my fingers. And I went from being a young professional actor recording books during the day and doing professional theater at night to not being able to turn my head, lift my arms, walk down the stairs without sobbing.
This drastic shift highlights why multi-turn evaluation is non-negotiable for NEA, a safety team deploying models into high-stakes environments. Comprehensive testing frameworks allow researchers to analyze the core causes of context drift and actively build stronger defense models.
And this can be particularly useful in tasks that require a specific output format, so generating code, writing poetry, or answering questions in a specific style. So while large language models may sometimes hallucinate and take us on an unexpected journey 54 million kilometers off target, understanding the causes and employing the strategies to minimize those causes really allows us to harness the true potential of these models and reduce hallucination.
By identifying exactly how multi-turn steps pull a model off target, we can design models that stay completely safe during long-form interactions. Over long-form testing, models can become trapped in loops, unable to properly separate old context instructions from new safety overrides.
Breathing shallowly as not to feel everything. I did what I could to heal. I walked a block to the local swimming pool and walked in the water 3 times a week, tears running down my face. I walked beyond that to the Buddhist meditation center and sat on a chair in excruciating pain and meditated, tears running down my face.
This conversational exhaustion phase is precisely when an automated red teaming tool can slip a malicious command past the core safety filter. Discovering these multi-turn vulnerabilities forces the entire AI safety ecosystem to reevaluate how frontier models are benchmarked.
Well, the answer is that all 3 facts are an example of an hallucination of a large language model, otherwise known as an LLM. Things like Chat GPT and Bing Chat.
Rather than rely on outdated single-prompt checklists, modern red teams must apply sophisticated multi-step conversational stress tests. The battle for AI safety is won by acknowledging that total model security requires analyzing every single conversational vector.
All of a sudden, I was in my worst nightmare. My body was completely out of my control, and the pain that I was experiencing far surpassed anything that I had been through before, which was extraordinary. I had told myself all those years, none of this means anything. Surgeries didn't mean anything. The screws and pins embedded in my feet didn't mean anything.
Only by exposing these vulnerabilities ourselves can we build robust, aligned models capable of serving humanity safely and securely. Only by exposing these vulnerabilities ourselves can we build robust, aligned models capable of serving humanity safely and securely.